This is the second part of lesson 17 where we're talking about the blues a little bit with Blue and Low. And I didn't want to clutter up that video with talking about history or what's going on here, because it's really not. This is completely just supplementary to that. But there is so much going on here that I hate to not stop and talk about a little bit. If I were not pushing your child so quickly through these method books, we would stop and we would work on improvisation, because all of this, that's all improvisation. And in fact, I even played it in the last video with short, just like I did there. That's not really how it's written. It's written like this. In fact, it's not even written swung. It tells you at the bottom you can do that. But it's supposed to be played long here, and another quarter note. You're supposed to hold that for the whole beat. I shortened it. I liked it better that way, because that's how you do jazz and blues. It's all improvised. It just came out of American history, where we had all these musicians that were messing around with their instruments after the Civil War, before kind of around World War I, up until that period, and they weren't trained, but they were learning how to play their instruments the way they wanted. But that doesn't mean that it didn't become very structured music. The blues and jazz is very structured. There's tons of rules with it, just like classical music, and it has its own kind of set of terms. Like we think of this is a major, and then this is a minor, and then a lot of it is revolved around this triad, first, third, and fifth. And so when we have this first, third, and fifth, what was happening down, I think of New Orleans, way down there, when remember, it's hot and humid down there. Nobody wants fast dance music in the South, and it's also really poor. And so you kind of have this "oh poor me" kind of kind of going on, and it affected the music. It was just kind of that feeling, I guess, and it affected the music. And so they weren't really looking for this kind of a sound, even though that is swung. They were kind of more like, I just improvised that off of just two notes there, and actually with their instruments. The piano, we can't really do a true blue note. A blue note is taking a major third or a major fifth, and you almost drop it a half step. On the piano, we have to just do this. That's the best we can do for our blues sound. But it would be about halfway, like if it's on a trumpet or any other kind of stringed instrument, you get to pick your pitch. And so they'd lower it just a bit, and we kind of get that. And you can do it on the fifth too. And you could put any kind of rhythm you want. This is kind of a syncopated rhythm here, where they're actually getting the beat there on the rest. It's another way to do it, but you could change this rhythm and do it different ways. So that's what they're talking about with blues. Now, as far as the structure of the 12-bar blues, this is how it's structured. 4 measures with the first degree, and I'm just thinking of the C major scale. This is in the C major scale because that's what we've been doing with the kids. So start here with the first degree, the first one, and then you do that for 4 measures. You can play anything you want as long as you're playing this C chord. And you can improvise it in any way you like. And that's what musicians do when they get together. They improvise. They know they're playing the 12-bar blues or some other form, whatever was called at the beginning, and they know what note they're starting on or what the key is or the first chord. And so they're improvising 4 measures. It's usually 4 time. 4 measures of the C chord, and they play that. And then after that, you got to be able to count to know when to change. Then they change to the 4th degree, and it goes from the 1st to the 4th. So it doesn't matter what note you start on. The next one's going to be the 4th, and that's the next 2 measures. And then they improvise within that fourth degree chord, which for us is an F because we started on the C. And then it goes back to the C for the next two. Okay, we're not to 12 measures yet. We've only gotten to 8 measures. So then when we get up here to this one, it's going to be the fifth degree. And then it's the fourth, just for one measure, and then back. There's a little, a tune we all know that's a little bit kind of a variation of the 12-bar blues, but here's the first degree. Here's the fourth, fifth, fourth, and that's just Louie Louie. But it's this 1, 4, 5, 4, and it just keeps repeating. And that's kind of the same thing with the 12-bar blues. It just repeats and repeats and repeats. That's why musicians can get together that have never played before, pull out their instruments. Somebody says, okay, we're going to do the 12-bar blues or the 8-bar or whatever, and they're going to call the key that they're going to start in, and then they take turns soloing, and they do these little solos, and everybody else knows that they must stay within that chord. And that's how improvisation begins. That's how it works. That's how they do it, and it sounds great. It doesn't sound like chaos like what you would think. Classical musicians don't have that option. We can't do that. It's structured music, and we have to know exactly what it is that we're playing. There's no improv in that. But that's what this is. And so what you're doing here is you're playing the 12. You'll notice the C, the F, the C, 1 of G, 1 of F, back to C for 2, and then it repeats. And then that's what is happening with this. So this wasn't just a little piece that they just said, oh, let's just make a little song, and they just wrote it. They didn't. They started with the form. They started with the 12-bar blues, and they knew what the first note was, and they said, and then it went from there. They just had a couple little motifs that they began with. Here's another, and then here's another one, and then it repeats, and they can vary it any way they want. So essentially, that's what's happening with this. If I weren't pushing your child so quickly through these books, I would stop, and we would work on, we'd probably do some different rhythms, and we'd do some improv, and we'd really work with it. But I wanted you to be exposed and understand what this is. This is a good one. This is a good one, and I'd encourage you to, look up Ken Burns and watch that jazz documentary that's out there. There's lots of great history about how the blues and jazz evolved, and it'll just make you love American history. So I'd encourage you to look into it. If you're trying to teach yourself and you're learning alongside your child, go in and do that for yourself. Play some of this. You don't have to just change the melody too. You could also change the chords in the left hand, but once you get started, it really is a fun way to sit and play the piano with no music in front of you, and yet you can still do some really cool things.